For more than 100 days
your
now,
vote.
The statues of Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt toppled by images from downtown Portland last night are emblematic of an issue that has dominated the city for more than 100 days now. Justice and the statues of Abraham Lincoln and Teddy Roosevelt, peaceful, toppled by protesters and destruction and clashes with police, have elevated tensions in the city and made Portland justice and fundamental police reform. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for a special edition of Your Voice, Your Vote. The clashes with Portland Mayor Debate have elevated tensions in the city. In a matter of weeks, voters will pick the next mayor of Portland. And that person will not only have to lead the city in this time of turmoil over racial justice and debate 2020. I'm Steve Dunn. Guide the city out of the pandemic and economic crisis and address that person will not only have to lead the city. Pandemic and economic crisis and address our ongoing homeless problem, among other issues. Incumbent Ted Wheeler and Sarah Iannarone are both vying for that position, and both are joining us remotely for tonight's live debate. Ted Wheeler is the current mayor of Portland, running for a second term. His past elected experience includes serving as Oregon State Treasurer and the Multnomah County Chair. His challenger, Sarah Iannarone, is a local small business founder, a PSU program administrator, and an urban climate policy expert. And tonight, each candidate will be given a minute to respond to each question. The first candidate to answer a question will then have a 30-second rebuttal. If we ask for clarification from a candidate, the timer will be reset. And my KATU colleague, Deb Knapp, will also be handling video questions submitted to KATU for the candidates. Half an hour ago, we drew names to determine the order of the debate, and Sarah Iannarone will answer first, followed by Mayor Ted Wheeler tonight. Here's our first question for Ms. Iannarone. Portlanders have a right to peaceful protest, and demands for racial justice must be heard. We've interviewed both of you during this campaign, and neither of you has given our viewers a clear path towards stopping the violent protests in the short term. I'm not talking about the peaceful ones. I'm talking about the violent protests. We've heard plans for long-term reforms, but people we hear from don't want to wait weeks or months for the violent protests to stop. Do you have a short-term plan to stop the protest violence? Ms. Iannarone, you have 1 minute.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. This is such an important question. The response to protests about police brutality cannot be more police brutality. I have laid out a plan. It's called my Rethinking Public Safety Plan. I proposed it last November, even prior to this moment, but it's more important now than ever. I have committed on day one to making Commissioner Joanne Hardesty our police commissioner. I have been working alongside young Black Lives Matter activists in this movement to make sure that our response will be sensitive to them. And most importantly, we need equal enforcement of the law. What we've seen time and again is disproportionate use of force against certain groups, while others, bad behavior goes unpunished. This is something that the current mayor has not been able to address, and I believe that I am better equipped since he's so obviously failed our city on this point.
Ms. Iannarone, I want to ask you that question again because the folks at home want a specific answer to your short-term plan to stop protest violence. Short-term, I'm talking long-term, right now. So you give us an answer for that, and you have 30 seconds for that answer.
Well, I'm not the mayor right now, and I don't control a movement. The mayor controls the Portland Police Bureau. What I have said is on day one of my administration, should I be elected, I will make Commissioner Hardesty the police commissioner. I will work alongside the Black Lives Matter youth to make sure that their needs are addressed. And I will work to rein in our rogue police force. There's not a lot more I can do as an average citizen in Portland, but there sure is a lot the mayor could be doing and is not.
Let's go to the mayor right now. Mayor Ted Wheeler, your short-term plan to stop the protest violence. You have 1 minute, sir.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for sponsoring this forum. The first thing the mayor has to do is clearly and unequivocally denounce the violence. This morning, I had a press conference alongside Carrie Timchuk, who's the director of the Oregon Historical Society, Tana Sanchez, who is a state representative and has worked for many years in Native American affairs here locally. And I clearly, unequivocally denounced the violence. And that's what leaders need to do. Make it clear that that is not a value we support, The second thing we need to do is hold people accountable who are engaged in violence or criminal destruction. That means contain them, arrest them when it's safe to do so. If it's not safe in the moment, follow up with investigative resources as we have, and then hold them accountable for that action. Third and finally, work with the community to have them understand that we get it, that they want police reform, that nonviolent demonstrators are looking for alternatives, and we're already engaging on that front.
Ms. Iannarone, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you'd like.
In many ways, the 120 plus nights of protests continuing are all the rebuttal I need. The current mayor has failed to lead on this issue. They need to do more than just use words, and certainly picking fights with Trump is not police reform. We need to mobilize behind Police Commissioner Hardesty, make sure that the needs of the community are being met, and work toward détente in the streets.
For the next question, we begin with Mayor Wheeler now. Why do you think, Mayor, that the violent protesters feel emboldened in Portland to keep doing what they're doing? Do your comments or actions lead them to think that it's okay? And you have 1 minute.
No, it's not okay. And I have been very clear from the get-go that I denounce violence. I don't tolerate it. I don't equivocate. If people are engaged in violence or criminal destruction in this city, we are going to hold them accountable as best as we can. That means making good arrests. That means working with the Multnomah County District Attorney and others to ensure that we give them good evidence so that they can make a clear case. But I've been clear and unequivocal. My opponent, however, has not been as clear or unequivocal in her denunciation of violence. In fact, she has declared publicly that she is Antifa. She has said on the record that sometimes nonviolent demonstration doesn't go far enough, and she's cheered Antifa on when they've been engaged in activities in the community that are reckless and dangerous. I have also denounced police violence, and I'm working to hold the police bureau accountable.
Mayor Wheeler, we're over 120 days of protest now. Many have turned violent, as you well know. I would imagine folks in the community, because you are in that position of mayor, feel that your voice has not been strong enough over this time. I'll give you 30 seconds to answer that.
Yeah, I don't know how my voice could be any stronger. I've said 100% all of the time, unequivocally, without any hesitation, I denounce all violence in the name of political ends. Violence is unacceptable. And to any mayor anywhere in America, that should be an absolute. It shouldn't be up for question.
Ms. Iannarone, I'm going to repeat the question to you. Why do you think violent protesters feel emboldened in Portland to keep doing what they're doing? Do your comments or actions lead them to think it's okay? And you have 1 minute.
Thank you. And I do want to clarify, because one of the ground rules of this debate was actually that we would not make false statements, and I have denounced violence at every turn. And so I want to correct the record. All violence is wrong, no matter who does it. But one of the reasons that we see protesters coming back night after night is because the current mayor fails to denounce police violence. He will not even say the names of people killed by Portland police. What we need is to have not leaders who are throwing the same accusations at me that the Trump administration is throwing at me, because we know how harmful that is. We need leaders who will stand alongside these young Black Lives Matter activists and work toward a peaceful solution, because what the current mayor is doing is clearly not working.
Ms. Iannarone, I want to ask you a question. The mayor touched upon it. You have said in the past that I am Antifa in some publications. Antifa, of course, anti-fascist, but Antifa has become known as left extremism involved in violence, particularly in the Portland area. Your response to that now?
Vice President Joe Biden said it on the national stage. This is the idea that these white nationalists will have no safe harbor in our sanctuary city. And Mayor Wheeler should be standing alongside me in this moment saying that he too supports anti-fascism. Because when we allow these terms to be levied against peaceful people in our city who are fighting for civil and human rights, it opens the door to these white nationalist extremists. And I have been unequivocal on that point, and I will remain so.
Mayor Wheeler, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, well, first of all, she has not been unequivocal. And I would simply refer to her own Twitter feed where she not only says she's Antifa, I'm happy to see her backing away now and saying it's a more general statement of about being anti-fascist, but she also made it clear that she did not believe that nonviolent demonstration necessarily went far enough. And she said other things on her social media site that now she's walking away from as quickly as she can. I don't blame her.
We are also taking your questions to the candidates tonight. And this question comes to us from Judy Duncan in Northwest Portland.
I'd like to ask a question in relationship to the damage from the protests and riots. I'd like to know when the downtown will be refurbished and repaired as it was before the riots and the protests. And I'd like to know where the money is coming from to make the repairs. Thank you.
Judy, thank you. Ms. Iannarone, you get to respond first.
I love Portland's downtown. I've spent a long time working there. I lived there at one point, and all roads lead there when you're a transit rider. And so I understand the frustration of so many of our downtown residents with the disruption that's been going on night after night, but also because of COVID. We have to be very realistic that our storefronts are boarded up still because of COVID. And so ultimately, the rebuilding that's going to need to happen is going to need to be part of the COVID recovery. We need to work hard to activate the street level retail. We can work hard incentivizing through Prosper Portland, making sure that minority and women-owned businesses have priority in our small business assistance, and making sure that we're bringing people out into the streets in convivial fashion to celebrate in our parks and green spaces once it's safe to come out from COVID again.
Mayor Wheeler, same question to you. When will downtown be repaired to what it was before the riots and the protests, and where will this money come from?
Well, first of all, we know the order of things. We already have the roadmap in our hands. The first step is end the violence. And last night, downtown clearly demonstrated the violence has not yet ended. We have to end the violence, redeploy our police officers to the neighborhood precincts where they're desperately needed. Then we need to clean the downtown up. And so I've already put a plan into place. It's already being funded. We're redoubling our efforts around litter collection, graffiti abatement. We're working with business owners and operators, not just big downtown businesses, but small businesses as well, on a downtown revitalization program that's going to encourage people to come downtown, provide benefits for people who come downtown. The city will also chip in by providing parking incentives and other ways to get people downtown. We'll work with TriMet and other agencies, and we're going to make a big splash about getting businesses back open, take the boards down, clean the city up, and reopen as safely and quickly as we can under the COVID restrictions.
Ms. Iannarone, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal if you'd like.
Yes, and the first point in the mayor's downtown revitalization plan is stopping the nightly violence. And he's clearly demonstrated that that's beyond his capacity. So I'm not sure what other parts of his plan we're going to be able to count on if he can't actually execute the first step. As the only person running who's actually opened and operated a small business in Portland, I believe I'm well equipped to address the needs of Portland's businesses at this time.
We are off to a good discussion so far. Much more to talk about. We'll continue our Portland mayoral debate when we come back.
on the Portland street response so that police aren't responding to people experiencing mental health crises in our community. The second thing I've done is people said they want demilitarized police. So for the first time ever, the police bureau under my leadership now has the public safety support specialists, non-armed police officers in the community. I've also heard from many people that they want an independent way for the community to engage and review directives. So I created the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. And I'm working with my colleagues on the City Council about accountability mechanisms. We're referring something to the ballot in November that I hope people will support. And I'm working with my colleagues to negotiate a stronger contract to hold police accountable.
Ms. Iannarone, the same question to you. As the city's next mayor, what reforms will you work to implement? You have 1 minute.
I am proud to have released the most comprehensive rethinking public safety plan in this election. And I did it prior to the current uprising because I knew it was the right and necessary thing to do to stop wasteful spending and make sure that we're investing in community programs that work. What we have seen consistently from this mayor, including $8 million plus in what it's just costing us to deal with his failed response to the protests this summer, is a lack of accountability. We've seen families tear gassed in their homes. We have seen journalists, legal observers, medics brutalized night after night on his watch. And I'm just not sure how people believe that he is capable of leading our city in this moment when, as mayor, he's failed to accomplish what he's promising to do if we reelect him.
Mayor Wheeler, you have 30 seconds of rebuttal if you'd like to take it.
Yeah, well, first of all, there's some common ground here. I'm not here to argue that the police bureau has done everything well. They most certainly haven't. And that's why the city council wants more oversight and accountability authority. That's why we've referred an overhaul of the oversight and accountability measures to the voters in November. I'll support it. I hope everybody here supports it. And when my team goes through and sees videos of people who look like they're not comporting by the rules of the police bureau, we pull them off active duty and we put them behind a desk until they've been thoroughly reviewed. That's what we've done.
Mayor Wheeler, since your time in office, you have appointed yourself as the police commissioner. Ms. Iannarone, you said you'll appoint Portland City Commissioner Joanne Hardesty to that job. Ms. Iannarone, my question is to you right now. Why do you think it's important that Commissioner Hardesty become the police commissioner if you are elected mayor? You have 1 minute.
She ran in 2018 largely on a police reform agenda. She has the trust of the community. She's leading on the police oversight accountability ballot measure this November. And she brings decades of experience, not just in the community, but in this subject area to lead. But it also frees me up to continue to comment on policing because I will not be in the position of administering that bureau, which means that I can work hand in hand with both DA Schmidt and Commissioner Hardesty to set the vision for the rethinking of community safety that this city needs. And in fact, Commissioner Hardesty recently rescinded her endorsement of the current mayor because she did not feel that he had the capacity to lead on this. And to this day, he has failed to heed her call to make her police commissioner at this time. I really don't think that the distinctions between me and Mayor Wheeler could be more clear on this point.
Mayor Wheeler, the question to you now, why is it important that the mayor act as police commissioner? And you have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, I've had many meetings with Commissioner Hardesty on this subject. I work well with her. I've made it clear to her that come January, when we have a new city council, all of the bureaus are on the table, including the police bureau. But listen, let's talk about what Commissioner Hardesty would do if she's elected mayor. She's been if she was elected mayor, sorry, Joanne, if she were the police commissioner, she said she'd bring in a new chief, number one. I've now worked with 4 chiefs and they're great people, but having a new chief doesn't necessarily solve all the problems. She's called for demilitarization. I've already done that by limiting CS gas and other tools. She's called for accountability mechanisms. We just referred one to the ballot. And of course, she's looking for non-police interventions, and I'm partnering with her already on the Portland Street response. So I believe Commissioner Hardesty and I are already colleagues. We're working together. We're going to continue to push for a stronger police contract. And as mayor, that's my leadership. I chose to engage the rest of the council and hire outside legal counsel to give us a stronger handle on oversight and accountability through a new contract.
Ms. Anarone, 30 seconds if you'd like it.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen consistently a mayor who's breaking campaign finance regulations, tear gassing mothers and babies in their homes. He's having a hard time working with the community on this. I'm just not sure why people think if they re-elect him, things will be different on the other side of November than they are now. Right now, I'm offering voters a clear progressive alternative to that. Someone who sees equal enforcement of the law as the basis of ending the nightly protests, that understands that if we can end the police violence, then we can keep our BIPOC neighbors safe. Again, it's a clear choice between more of the same and something new.
On to our next video question for the candidates. This question comes from Daryl Turner. Daryl is the president of the Portland Police Association.
Being that in the last budget cycle, the city council, along with the mayor, decided to defund the police, disbanding the gun violence reduction team, which was one of the most effective teams of its type in the country. And now we see that gun violence has skyrocketed over those months that they disbanded that unit. What efforts are they going to make to reestablish that unit and reestablish safety for the citizens of Portland?
And this question goes to you, Mayor Wheeler, first.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with the premise of the question. In fact, gun violence started spiking in December, well before any decision was made about the gun violence reduction team. It then plateaued during COVID. It went up again over the summer, as it does, and it's part of a national trend. But where we agree is we do need a clear and well thought out strategy around gun violence. I'm going back to my colleagues on the city council and asking them to put more resources into the Office of Violence Prevention so we can work with 20 coalition partners who are actually close and have the respect of people who are actually impacted by gun violence. And then on the policing side, we've made some really good common sense allocations to increase the funding that's going towards the specifically investigative follow-up. So on the non-police side, we're building the community relations and working with those who are impacted by gun violence. And on the police side, we're focusing on following up on important investigative work. That's a win-win.
Ms. Anarone, the same question. What efforts are you going to make to reestablish the gun violence reduction team and reestablish safety for the citizens of Portland?
This is where I'm so proud of the team that I have built. One of my youngest policy advisors is a 13-year-old March for Our Lives organizer who's been fighting for this issue her entire life. And so what my team has done is work with youth, work with elders, work with leaders in healthcare and urban policy to put together a 6-point plan to deal with gun violence in our city. You can find that at sarah2020.com/GVP. But what I really want to focus on is this. We need to draw down police-heavy interventions, and we need to reinvest in our investments in community and public health. Gun violence is a public health crisis, and we need upstream solutions focused on making sure that our most vulnerable Portlanders, BIPOC Portlanders in this case, are shored up against the violence through economic interventions, housing stability, education, and sensible enforcement of gun legislation.
Mayor Ted Wheeler, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, we all agree on those strategies. Nobody disagrees about the importance of household stability or family stability or educational employment stability in terms of reducing gun violence. That's exactly why the Office of Violence Prevention is so critically important to this whole mix. And that's why I really want my colleagues to support our efforts to build a coalition or strengthen a coalition with 20 community organizations that includes NEA, the Latino Network, and others who already have trust in the community of those who are the most directly impacted by gun violence. This works in other cities. So violence prevention is so critically important to this whole mix. And that's why I really want my colleagues to support our efforts to to build a coalition or strengthen a coalition with 20 community organizations that includes NEA, the Latino Network, and others who already have trust in the community of those who are the most directly impacted by gun violence. This works in other cities. It's going to work in Portland.
So many issues out there affect you at home. Coming up, we'll hear the candidates' plans surrounding the pandemic. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Debate 2020 involving our mayoral candidates. And Ms. Diana Roan, you will answer the question first in this round. The winner of this particular race is going to have to deal with the COVID crisis next year in 2021. At some point, the city is not going to be able to continue the moratorium on rent. Landlords are going to need money and renters may not be able to pay up. So what happens then? And you have 1 minute.
This is such an important question, and we really can't talk about COVID recovery without talking about this very thing. It's one reason why having a small business mayor that we trust is going to be critical, so that we can distinguish between the outside real estate speculators who are making big profits during this pandemic and the mom and pops who are having a hard time making a go of it in whatever business they're in. And so making sure that we're clearly distinguishing who's in need of our assistance on the other side of this is going to be critical, whether those are small landlords, our renters in our city, and even looking as closely as geographies to make sure that we're intensifying investments in neighborhoods where schools have high turnover or we have high BIPOC populations. We need to make sure that our investments are being targeted, that they're equitable, and that we're not supporting Wall Street. We're supporting everyday Portlanders.
Mayor Wheeler, your chance on this one. We're talking about the COVID crisis coming up in 2021. Landlords are going to need that money. Renters may not be able to pay their rent. So what happens then? And you have 1 minute.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud of our COVID response, both on the health response, where we acted early to make sure people were physically distancing, and we bent the curve down here in Portland and across the state of Oregon. The city of Portland, under my leadership and Prosper Portland, was the first jurisdiction in the state to actually create an economic recovery task force, including people who were concerned about rent and people who were concerned about small businesses. We were then the first to get dollars out the door, both to households for essential purchases and rent support, as well as small business support. When it comes to actual rent support, we've put $35 million of CARES funding alongside Multnomah County into rent support. However, the gap is going to be about $105 million come October/November. And so we also need our state partners and our federal partners to do their fair share to support rent. That helps people stay in their units. It'll also help landlords pay the bills they need to pay.
Ms. Anarone, you have 30 seconds for rebuttal if you'd like that.
I'm not here to armchair quarterback our Democratic leaders who I know worked very hard to shore us up during this difficult time. What I can say is this. We're going to have a clear choice in November, and it's between someone who has been bickering with the head of the county recently, even as we're looking at a very difficult winter from a perspective of people experiencing homelessness, and someone who actually has focused more recently his coalition building efforts on putting hundreds of thousands of dollars into his failing re-election bid rather than focusing on the issues that are really facing Portlanders.
For the next question, we begin with Mayor Wheeler for this one. If there isn't another stimulus package from the federal government, and that looks like a distinct possibility in the months to come, how much can the city do on its own? And as mayor, how will you respond? And you have 1 minute.
Yeah, well, first of all, let's be clear. We cannot close the gap alone. There's no jurisdiction at the local level anywhere in the state of Oregon, including Portland, that can close the entirety of that gap without support from our state legislature or our federal partners. So part of the job of the mayor and all mayors in the state of Oregon is to lobby the state legislature and to lobby the governor and make sure that we get the resources that the state has allocated towards the most critical components of the community. It's up to us to let the legislature and the governor know what our top needs and priorities are. And right now, it's rent support. Rent support will help keep people in their units, and it allows landlords to be able to pay things like their utility bills, their mortgages, and other expenses so that we don't lose our local housing stock to Wall Street firms.
Ms. Anarone, same question for you. No stimulus package. How can the city do this on their own? And you have 1 minute.
I'll give two answers to that because one, this is about someone who works in community, who's been a renter in East Portland, who is working closely with housing activists and advocates on this issue, is more closely associated with the people who are best able to lead on this, which is the people experiencing foreclosure and eviction. That said, I do not trust the incumbent to lead us on this issue. Of late, these anti-tenant lobbying organizations, big corporate interests interested in profiting off Portland's housing crisis, have invested a great deal of money in the incumbent to make sure that he is reelected over me. And I think that speaks volumes to what his priorities will be if he's reelected, when hard choices about who gets money and who gets subsidized and who gets protected really come into play.
Mayor Wheeler, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
I'm not sure that really warrants a response. So look, I'm going to stick to the facts. Here's what we're actually doing. Not only are we putting resources into rent support, we also were the first to put forward real resources, millions of dollars towards essential household purchases through cards. So if people weren't able to meet their housing payments or other important household items, they were able to do it. And we just extended the reload ordinance to allow people, particularly lower income renters, be able to stay in their community, in their housing. And we do this working with community partners.
Coming up after the break, we're going to hear what the candidates have to say on the homeless crisis. A lot of you are asking about that. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. Back to our video questions. This one on the topic of homelessness. Lisa Schroeder is the owner of Mother's Bistro and Bar in downtown Portland.
Thank you, KATU, for having me here today. Ted and Sarah, I'd like to know if you have any plans for Old Town Chinatown. Businesses that can are leaving the area, and those that can't are either closing or losing customers and employees. The conditions in the neighborhood show the terrible suffering of the houseless. While problems have been here for decades, they're much worse due to COVID. We can't let that suffering be what Portland is about. It's unconscionable to ignore the needs of the people living on the streets who deserve the dignity of basic services and public safety. Doorways of businesses like Mother's have become bathrooms. Garbage is strewn because there are no garbage cans. What are your plans for basic needs, if any?
Ms. Iannarone, this goes to you first.
Thank you, Lisa, for that important question and for your continued advocacy in our community. This is one place where it's important to say that I'm proud to have direct experience in this area. I have been working on these solutions in my neighborhood for years. I have also been volunteering at the Blanchet House, and so I have been talking with the people there about what's working and what's not as they're providing direct assistance to people in that neighborhood. And here are a few things that I understand. One, we need to have greater access to essential basic hygiene, refuse collection, and public assistance here. We need to make sure that we're establishing more intentional temporary villages like I've been calling for years, and the current administration is just now starting to bring them online. And ultimately, we need to be more efficient when we bring these programs online. What I hear from people all around the city is that the help that they need from the Portland Mayor's office is not forthcoming. They make it very difficult to get things done, and I believe that I will have a better working relationship with the people who are innovating to solve our most pressing problems.
Mayor Wheeler, same question. What are your plans for basic needs for the homeless, if any?
Yeah, I was actually, and Lisa, I appreciate the question. I actually had the opportunity to visit a number of the small businesses in Old Town Chinatown just about a week ago, and I heard many of the same things. I saw many of the same things. So here's the plan. Number one, first of all, I love the Joint Office of Homeless Services, but I am critical of the fact that we have not done enough around the chronic homeless, and we haven't done enough to address the emergency of people who are on the streets today. And so I've called for 300 additional shelter beds just in the last couple of weeks. So we now have 300 more spaces. We're looking for other opportunities. We've expanded the number of hygiene sites around the city, including in Old Town Chinatown. We're working specifically on a partnership in Old Town Chinatown around clean and safe, to clean up the litter, to clean up the graffiti. And so it's important that we have humane and compassionate alternatives for people on the street that put their safety front and center, as well as the broader community. All of these things together are going to make a difference.
Ms. Iannarone, you have 30 seconds.
If they're going to make a difference, why aren't they making a difference now? Ted Wheeler is the mayor. I don't understand why. It's one thing for me to have to wait to get elected to be able to do these things because I'm just a single working mom out here trying to pay my bills. But he's the mayor and he has the power. And so if he has a problem with the joint office, why isn't it fixed? If there aren't enough shelter beds, why aren't they there? This is the 4th year of his administration. He promised to address this issue. I just really don't think that his claims match up with everyday Portlanders' understanding about what's going on in our city.
Such an important issue. Certainly $70 million a year spent in Multnomah County in Portland on homeless services. And Mayor Wheeler, we begin with you for this next question. We've seen the number of homeless camps around the city explode during this pandemic. How do you balance the needs of the homeless with people in the neighborhoods who are absolutely frustrated by what they're seeing out there?
Yeah, let's be clear, though, why there's this explosion. First of all, the city is following federal guidance. The Center for Disease Control made it very clear that, number one, we had to do physical distancing in our shelters. We also, that meant that a lot of the nonprofits that provided services no longer did. So we stood up 3 managed camps where people have access to hygiene and water and services. We expanded the number of shelter opportunities we have. Despite what my opponent just said, I actually just expanded by 300 the number of shelter beds. That's on top of the fact that the joint office, the city and the county and others in the community. We've more than doubled the amount of shelter beds in the community over the last 4 or 5 years or so. And now we're also connecting people to services. With the Here Together bond measure that just passed, we can now connect people with mental health services, substance abuse services, job training, and other services to help those who are most chronically homeless get off the street and stay off the street. That's the plan.
Ms. Iannarone, it is your chance. You'll have 1 minute now to answer the same question. Balancing the needs of the homeless with the neighborhoods who are frustrated by what they're seeing out there.
I've thought about this a lot. I'm the land use and transportation chair for the Mount Scott Arleta neighborhood, where again, our neighborhood has welcomed multiple shelters in recent years. And we even set up a COVID hygiene hub for unhoused neighbors where they could come by and refill on supplies like socks and hand sanitizer. I have a very good understanding of the neighborhood system, but I've also been working very closely with homelessness advocates and understanding how when we try to bridge the divides effectively, we can make greater progress. I've also noticed how in recent weeks, we've seen the current mayor squabbling with the head of the county at a time when more than ever, we need to all be facing in the same direction, working on these pressing problems. Again, it's a failure of management. If there are issues in the middle of a crisis with the joint office, they should have been addressed long ago. But really what we need is everybody in this city facing in the same direction on this issue. We need a compelling leader with a clear vision to bring everyone together to get it done.
Mayor Wheeler, I see you shaking your head over here. You have 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, look, part of being mayor is having honest and professional disagreements with people. Your job is to advocate for the needs in the community. And as you just heard, there are people who are suffering on our streets who need compassionate services to help them get off and stay off the streets. And you have people who are frustrated about tents blocking their houses and their businesses. And so I've been pushing the joint office, not in a mean way, but in a way that I think it's important for us to address the crisis now. We need compassionate and urgent means to get people off the sidewalks as quickly and safely as we can.
We will continue our mayoral debate right after this. Stay with us. On to our final question before the closing statements. In an effort to save time for those statements, you'll each have 40 seconds to answer the next question and then 20 seconds for rebuttal. And Ms. Iannarone, we're going to begin with you for this one. What's one decision that you've made in your career that you wish you could redo? You have 40 seconds.
Once I walked away from a job in a disagreement with a chef that I had in my former career. I was a professional chef, and we had a disagreement over the future course of how we were going to go. And instead of staying and work it out, I walked away from that relationship. But what I've learned in that time is that sometimes things are going to be hard. You're not always going to agree with your colleagues. But at the end of the day, you're stronger when you can find a pathway to peace, facing in the same direction. And I really think that walking away from conflict is something that we shouldn't do when we're looking to lead, that we really need to cooperate, collaborate, and find a way to get along.
Mayor Wheeler, 40 seconds to answer the same question. Decision you've made in your career you wish you could redo.
I actually wish that I had given John Kitzhaber more of the benefit of the doubt when he was governor. I wish we'd found an alternative solution to having him resign under the circumstances under which he resigned. You know, his voice was a really important voice around public health. I think his voice is already important in this context, and I'm glad to see him re-engaging on the public health front.
Ms. Iannarone, I'm not sure you need a rebuttal for this, but you have 20 seconds if you'd like to use it.
Rebuttal, let's just move on.
Let's do that. Thank you very much. We're going to have our candidates' closing statements when we come back here on K2. Stay with us. Welcome back to our mayoral debate, and both candidates will now have 90 seconds for a closing statement. Mayor Wheeler, we begin with you. You have 90 seconds.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for tuning in. I am Ted Wheeler and I'm your mayor. I was born and raised here. I'm a product of the local public school system. I chose to raise my daughter here, and like all of you, I love Portland and I have a stake in the future. We know we've got some real challenges. I meet with thousands of Portlanders throughout every corner of this city, and I hear the frustration and the anxiety, and yes, even the anger. And as a native Portlander, I share it and I understand it. But I also want to let you know, we're working hard to address all of these issues. COVID, the economic crisis, the calls for racial justice and equity, calls for police reform, ending the nightly violence, cleaning up the litter and graffiti in our public right-of-ways, and yes, working with businesses large and small to safely reopen. I'm proud that I've been endorsed by all of the major unions that represent people like nurses, assistants, carpenters, grocery store workers, caregivers, and others. The Portland firefighters have endorsed me. I'm proud of that endorsement. I'm also proud to have the endorsements of the Oregonian and the Tribune. And this is an important election for all of us. You have a choice to make, and you have to decide who's best equipped to lead us through this crisis and restore the luster of our city and expand it. And as your former Multnomah County Chair, your former state treasurer, and your mayor, I'm asking you for your vote and your consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sarah Iannarone, you have the floor next for 90 seconds.
Yes, and thank you so much for tuning in for this critical discussion, because this election is pivotal. We have just heard from an incumbent who's talking about problems that he will solve if reelected, as if he hasn't been the mayor for 4 years as our city has continued to decline. There is a tipping point here in terms of whether we are going to stay on a path of that continued decline or whether we are going to go toward true progressive alternative with clear plans and the relevant background to get us where we need to go. What we are facing is a long line of career politicians who have failed to solve our most pressing problems. I am most qualified to lead our city right now because of the life experience I bring. I'm an expert in urban sustainable development. I have worked in my community, in my neighborhood, on advisory committees all over the city. I have a fine-grained understanding of one end of the city to the other. And this is what I'm asking you tonight. Do things feel better under Ted Wheeler's leadership? I don't think so. And so what I'm asking you to do is this. Vote for me this November. I'm a publicly financed grassroots candidate who cannot be bought by big special interests. I will be there for the people of the city, making sure that the little guy is taken care of and that we're focusing on everyday livability for every single Portlander in the city. Thank you very much. Good night. Stay healthy. Take care.
Thank you both. I'm most impressed with the fact that you both stayed on time. That does not happen in debates, I can tell you that. That does it for us tonight. Don't forget, tomorrow is the last day to register to vote in Oregon. Ballots will start being mailed out on Wednesday. October 20th is the last day to mail ballots before Election Day on November 3rd. Hopefully this debate will help you decide which candidate you'll get your vote.